Hello and welcome. I'm Karen McNenny, author, mediator, co-parent specialist, and divorce consultant. And this is the Good Divorce Show, where we don't just talk about how to get divorced, but how to be divorced. Divorce is not a weapon, it's a tool. And when used well, it can be a tool for transformation. Thanks for being here. Let's dive in. Hi. Welcome to Tea Time with Karen. This is part 3 of me sharing the journey of the book, The Good Divorce, which is coming out. And by the time this episode airs in late May, many of you, I hope, will already have it in your hands. And these books arrived in the very last week of April. And in episode 1, part 1 of this book journey, I mentioned that the first domino of this whole journey was April 26, 2024, when Andy Earl and Write It Great sent me a message and said, "Hey, have you ever thought about writing a book?" And 2 years later, to the day, April 26th, a box of 300 books showed up on my front porch. Can you believe that? Big reveal. That's what was delivered. Woo! And here is the book, baby. Oh my God. Look, Mom, there's me. Oh. This journey has been so disorienting, at times overwhelming, a big grind, very expensive. And I just keep believing in it because, as my mentor, Laura Munson, said, and I went to her Haven writing retreat, which I highly recommend, in the midst of all of this as well. This book has been chasing me. And I just look at these signposts and how quickly this is gone. And I remember telling a friend early on, like, "Oh, someone's asked me to write a book. I'm going to write a book proposal." She's like, "Oh my gosh, you're going to have a book later this year?" And I'm like, maybe in 2 years if I'm lucky, but it can take a year to write it. And then you got to go shop it around. And then you got to get 27 rejection letters and you got to rewrite it and get a new agent. Yeah, I never even had an agent. It's just bonkers. So I know this book wants to be in the world. It's kind of like our second born child. We wanted a second child. We didn't know it was going to happen when it did. And it's like, yeah, he just needed to come in the world then. That's when he wanted to arrive. And this is when this book wanted to arrive. And I'm just a vessel for it. My book baby. It came early because I had the invitation a year ago to speak at the Montana Society of HR Professionals, which I've done many times before. The HR world is where my professional life has been. And I told the conference coordinator when she called, and I said, "Oh, that's great. Their conference is May 1st, 2026. My book is due to come out in early May. Maybe we can get, or mid-May, maybe we can get books. And she's like, "Oh, we love having authors. That's great, Karen. And we could probably arrange to get everyone a book in the audience." And I said, that would be spectacular. Talk about a wonderful business book launch. And then she said, "What's it about? What's it called?" And I said, "It's called The Good Divorce. How to End Your Marriage Without Ending Your Family." She went, "Oh, huh. Well, we're a bunch of HR professionals." I'm like, "I know. I'm well aware of who my audience is, and I think it works. And this is why. For 2 reasons. The first of which is HR people are often the ones in the business world who are leading breakups at work. And for years, I've been helping organizations break up with employees that have stayed too long, projects that no longer serve them, policies that are outdated, right? Change and transformation has been my jam in working with organizations. And for the last year, I've been testing this material in those professional settings, not about the book, not about divorce, called Breaking Up is Hard to Do. And why we hold on, where our resistance are, why we can't get over the hump of, we're just bad at breakups. And then I would just sort of mention, and I just wrote a book about doing breakups better. And it's forthcoming. So it was a little sprinkling and I was testing material. So I knew that I could speak to an HR audience, in particular, human resource, for those of you who don't know the lingo, the human resource crowd, and give them tools about recognizing in their own workplace where things need to end and how we can have an elegant exit or dismissal with dignity. The other reason that I'm really excited to speak to HR people is I want a stack of these books in every HR office across the country. Because when employees are going through divorce, they're kind of worthless for a while. I was. Anybody who's been there, most of the time, there is a period where you are so distracted, your nervous system is on fire, you're at your desk, you're not getting much done, you have all these interruptions with your attorney meetings, maybe your therapist. And we know the research will show us that divorce is the second most stressful event that any adult will go through. Second to death of spouse. And then there's like incarceration, death of child or close family member. But number 2 is divorce. Number 3 is separation. And then you get change of job, moving. Well, when it's the divorce package, it's a very special package because it often comes with so much change. You might be changing your job. You might be moving, very well might be moving out of your home, you and your spouse or one of you. Your identity as a full-time parent is probably shifting. Maybe you were a very minimal parent and you're moving up to part-time parent, right? Like your whole world is disoriented. We all know this. And yet, within the workplace, the Family Medical Leave Act does not cover divorce. The Family Medical Leave Act exists to provide support for up to 12 weeks that your job will be protected when you have a life crisis, when you're caring for an elder parent or yourself are going through perhaps cancer treatment, when you've had a baby. These big life signposts, we move forward formally as employers to protect employees and give them support. Not divorce. So I got lots of opinions about that. And I want the HR world to come on board and think about, until we can change policy, what are they doing as employers and in the human resource world? So all that to say, don't want to bore you with all those details. I, on May 1st, did a keynote presentation to the Montana Society of HR Professionals. It was their annual conference in my hometown. What are the chances? With my peeps. And 250 books went out the door. And I don't know. This is now kind of the bizarre part of being the author of something that you've just like held so tight. And it's weird. Like they showed up and I'm like, oh, well, yeah, there it is. Because I've been living in it and around it for so long, there's been so much harder parts that it's, I hate to say it, there was a moment that it was a little anticlimactic. And I need to go back and reread the book again for the 552nd time to also think about what I want to highlight when I'm doing public appearances at other conferences and book signing events. of what in here now I think are powerful sound bites to draw you into the story. And one of the things that I did at the conference is I was trying to make the case of why this topic and why this book applies to kind of everyone. And I asked the question, I said, if you yourself have gone through a divorce, please stand. And it was a little slow because there's still a lot of shame around and isolation around divorce. We have a really negative narrative culturally, which is not helping us, because shame and isolation is the last thing someone needs when they're going through a divorce. So those people stood, and I stand there with them, right? I'm one of you. We've raised our kids from kindergarten to college. We're proud of our children. We're proud of the family that we are and that we will continue to be, which is not to say a good divorce is an easy divorce. I'm not saying that. It is hard as hell. But there's on stage and off stage. And off stage is where the grown-ups do their garbage. And on stage is where they raise their kids. And that's kind of the only thing you have to do, is just keep asking each other, how are they doing? How are kids doing? What do we need to know? So I asked the conference participants, stand if you have been divorced. And there were maybe 30 people of that 250. And then I said, if you married someone who has been divorced, like you're the number two, the second string, stand. If you're an adult child of divorce, stand. If you have a family member who's been divorced, stand. A close friend, a colleague, your neighbor. And pretty soon, all but 20 people in that room were on their feet. All of us are divorce adjacent. Most. I can't say all. But it's hard to throw a stone anywhere and hit a person who hasn't been impacted by divorce. And yet we are neglectful of these families. We underestimate the grief and the hardship that families face. And we do very little intentional education about how to be divorced well, how to be a two-home family, right? Because that's really what you're doing. The divorce is this legal act. It's this moment in time, and it should be as cheap and efficient as possible. You know, it's funny. Attorneys are the only ones who don't have to bid out their work. Like, they don't have to bid. You come in and say, hey, we got these assets and this many kids and this is how old and we need these things, and about how long do you think it'd take and about how much do you think it'll cost? If someone's going to build me a house, that's a complicated undertaking. They have to tell me how much it's going to cost and how long it's going to take. Now, it might change. My plumber, they got to come and do a kitchen job. They're going to give me a bid. I wreck my car. I go to the auto dealership. Hey, how much is it going to cost? Labor. Now, sometimes we get inside, we get in the pipes, we get under the car, we realize, there's more. We didn't expect this. But we start with a framework because they're professionals and they kind of know what to expect. Now, every divorce is different, but the same could be said for a lot of things. And yet we don't ask our attorneys, they don't have to give us any time frame. It's open checkbook. And they always start by taking a big chunk to begin with. And I have to say, for the record, attorneys are doing exactly what they're trained to do, right? They don't get all the credit or all the blame for kind of where we've ended up in this divorce industrial complex, because this is how we train our attorneys to live in a world that is adversarial and filled with conflict. That's what the court system is built for. Well, if you don't even need an attorney if you're getting divorced, unless you can't make an agreement, or unless you, I don't know, want to have a dumpster fire on your hands. Now, not all attorneys. I work with attorneys, many of whom have said, I'm not litigating anymore. I will not go into a courtroom anymore and tear families apart. I won't participate in it. It's terrible. I don't want anything to do with it. They become mediators. They become divorce coaches, like myself. We try to find alternative dispute resolution. And there is a movement of pioneers that are walking alongside me. I'm walking alongside them. I am new to this story, right? It's 2026. It was all of 5 years ago that I became a coach. And really, I was just trying to learn more about the industry and what people needed, so that I didn't know there was going to be a book and a movement. But that's where I see my strength, is as a spokesperson and a poster child for how we can do it differently. So that's the chapter we're in now. That's part 3. I'm a marketing person. I'm on social media. I'm here more often. You see me. I hope you're following. I hope you're liking. I hope you're sharing, because all of that, it isn't for me. It's to get this message in the world. And we're doing that for children. And I tell my clients that I work with, I tell mom and dad, your kids are actually my client. You get to pay the bill, but I work for them. Because when we don't give an alternative path to parents, and for those of you without kids, right, it's still an enormous, challenging, difficult transformation in our life. But we need to educate. We need to challenge the system that is kind of broken and doesn't serve families and kids. We need to challenge this negative narrative that we have around divorce, that it's a weapon to be used against someone that you once had a love story with, and you're still going to have a forever relationship with. Graduation to grandbabies. I don't want your children to have to negotiate their parents' garbage on their wedding day. And it happens. It doesn't need to happen. But we need early intervention and prevention, right? Upstream. I always have this beautiful photo of the Bitterroot River behind me. And it reminds me that, part of the effort of this book and getting it into lots of, and it's, we wanted to make it paperback so you can tuck it away. It's not big and intimidating. It's full of stories. I've heard several pre-readers are like, oh my gosh, I couldn't put it down. Wow, it kind of reads like a novel. Oh, there's so much of your personal journey, Karen. Those are, we'll see. I want you to read it and tell me about it. I want you to go post some feedback online and the reviews, because that's what's going to help keeping the message alive. And I need a platform and a microphone, just like the Montana Society of HR Professionals. I'm going to go on the road. I'm going to do some bookstores here and there when I'm in a town doing a conference. But for me, the real value and the most efficient way is to get this book into the hands of people when I'm keynoting at a conference. And that could be a conference about writing or women's empowerment, because I am one and I've had a business for 18 years. But it is businesses of HR professionals and different associations, right? Because every business gets touched by their employees, and that's the world I've lived in for 20 years. It's also the collaborative law world, and it's the marriage and family therapists who maybe are underskilled with a graduation runway, right? Many of us are in therapy when we're trying to save our marriage. And then when we have to graduate to divorce school, which is what it should be more like, that's why I established the Good Divorce Academy, a place to learn the tools of how to do co-parenting across 2 homes well. All of those things, if I can help those marriage and family therapists say, and when a couple finally calls it quits, you hand them this on the way out the door, not a business card for an attorney. You don't have to start there. So now it's about marketing. It's about travel. It's about getting back into Stan the van with Moab and going out on the road. I'm excited to take invitations for people who want to host a conversation, a book club, and begin, the next journey of this book. And it's a big question mark for me right now, because I don't know where it will go or what it will mean to people. But I I just hold on to I hold on to the idea that if even one family, if one couple reads this book and sees an alternative path through their disillusion of their marriage and the renovation of their family, and they come out the other side recognizing we can we can we can almost celebrate our wisdom to not stay too long, because when we stay too long, it gets worse. So, from one person to another, I invite you, please order the book, read it. If you're a grandparent of a divorced child, if you're the child of a divorced child, parents, maybe you want to buy it for your parents. It's never too late to have a good divorce. If you are working alongside people, your friends, family, like, it's going to just let you understand more of the personal journey that people go through, the system that's in there, and how we can all be more supportive of an event that affects 40% of marriages and then exponentially affects 85% of the population in one way or another. I'm just making up my own statistic there. We are all touched and impacted socially and economically when divorces are destructive. So please, I invite you, come along as one of my advocates and a soldier in the fight against the divorce industrial complex, and make sure that this book gets into the hands of someone who needs it today. Or maybe you just set it aside because soon enough, you're going to hear from someone really close to you that is divorce curious. And the best time to talk about divorce is before you need one. That's how my book baby came into the world. Thank you so much for coming along for the journey and the story. We will be back to our regularly scheduled podcast events where I'm interviewing families and individuals, adult children of divorce, co-parents, and hearing about positive divorce outcomes. And of course, we will always have experts within the industry who are also pioneering for you to have a different outcome. And remember, everything will be okay in the end. And if it's not okay, it's not the end. I'm going to share just a little nugget from the book. And this is actually the very last chapter, chapter 10. It's called The New. And this is the opening reflection titled Family Ties. 4 years into the renovated version of our family, Anya's first middle school choir concert was no longer an event for which we had to brace ourselves. We knew what to expect. My parents would arrive at the gym ridiculously early to satisfy my mom's anxiety about getting good seats. She and my dad would save an entire row of bleachers for David and his dad, myself, little brother Dwyer, my sister's family. We didn't question if we would all sit together. That was a given. Anya didn't have to dart her eyes around the crowded bleachers searching for a divided family. She could easily find her family together. Per usual, Dwyer would sit between David and I, and as the kids walked single file through the gym and up onto the bleachers, we were all nudging each other, pointing towards Anya in the lineup. "Oh, there she is, Dwyer, on the top riser," David whispered, pointing out his big sister. "Oh, yeah. Wow. Oh, she looks so pretty," came the admiration from her little brother. "Oh, yes, she is. She gets that from her mama," came David's reply, without looking in my direction. He just kept smiling at Anya. I'm sure I had an expression of shock on my face as the comment washed over me. I couldn't remember the last time David had overtly said something kind to me or about me. Not that we were overtly rude or hostile to each other, but warmth and kindness hadn't really made its way back into the vernacular. My entire heart softened towards this man, the father of my children, my once upon a time husband, and all too often adversary. A tectonic shift took place in that moment. The slightest notion of kindness can have such a powerful effect. I leaned into Dwyer and whispered in his ear, but loud enough for David to hear. Oh, yes, but her musical talents? She gets that from Dado. As we worked to sew our family back together, I was reminded that our kids had, and always would be, a tapestry created from both of us. Why would anyone intentionally try to tear that apart? My first bookstore. And Laura Munson. Oh, there it is.